They stood in a line at dawn, 12 Japanese women facing American rifles, their fate sealed by the brutal logic of war. What happened next would shatter everything they believed about their enemies, and themselves. When mercy arrives from an unexpected source, suspicion and hatred threaten to destroy the fragile peace of a war-torn village. As former enemies become reluctant allies, one soldier's act of compassion will be tested by those who still thirst for vengeance. Major Luke Hollis must choose between duty and humanity, knowing his decision might cost him everything he has left. What these women discover in the shadow of execution will change their lives forever. Subscribe now, and tell me in the comments if you've ever witnessed an act of mercy that transformed hatred into healing. Gray mist hung low over the ruined Japanese airfield. The morning air felt heavy with dread. 12 women stood in a ragged line, their eyes fixed on the ground. Their feet were bare, their clothes torn and dirty from weeks of captivity. American soldiers stood guard around them, rifles ready. Aiko Tanaka gripped the small wooden cross hidden in her sleeve. Her fingers traced its rough edges as she prayed silently. The other women trembled beside her. They all knew what happened to prisoners when they were told to line up at dawn. Major Luke Hollis rode up on a jeep, dust coating his uniform. His face was red from the tropical sun, and tired lines creased around his eyes. He had been in the Philippines too long, seen too much. He climbed out, holding a folded paper in his hand. "Sir," said a young sergeant, saluting, "the prisoners are ready." Hollis nodded. He looked at the women, hollow-eyed, some barely standing. One had a fever, her face flushed despite the cool morning. Another held her arm at an odd angle, probably broken. "They expect to die," the sergeant said quietly. Hollis unfolded the paper. "I have orders regarding these prisoners," he announced. Aiko closed her eyes. She had been captured 3 weeks ago, after hiding in the jungle for months following Japan's retreat. She had worked as a nurse at a field hospital, tending both Japanese soldiers and local villagers. Now she would die without seeing home again. "These women are to be transferred," Hollis read from the paper. "They will provide agricultural labor for post-war reconstruction efforts." Aiko's eyes opened. She looked up at the American officer, not sure she had heard correctly. "Sir?" The sergeant looked confused. "These are my orders," Hollis said firmly. "These prisoners will assist in replanting rice fields in villages damaged during the fighting." The women whispered to each other in disbelief. Not execution. Work. "The firing squad is dismissed," Hollis ordered. The sun broke through the morning mist, casting golden light across the yard. Aiko looked up at the sky, tears filling her eyes. "Arigato," she whispered. "Thank you." Hollis folded the paper and put it in his pocket. As he walked back to his jeep, he glanced at Aiko, noticing the glint of something in her hand. She quickly tucked the cross away, but not before he saw it. The major paused, then continued to his vehicle. He had made many hard choices in this war. Today, he had chosen mercy. The truck bounced hard over the rutted jungle road. Aiko grabbed the wooden side rail to keep from falling as they hit another hole. The 12 women sat crowded in the back, guarded by 2 American soldiers who perched on the tailgate, rifles across their laps. Major Hollis followed on horseback, the animal picking its way carefully along the muddy track. They had been traveling since mid-morning, the tropical heat building around them. "Where do you think they're taking us?" whispered Hana, a young woman who had worked as a radio operator. "To work in the fields," said Aiko. "Like they said." "Americans say many things," muttered Keiko, an older woman with gray streaks in her black hair. Yumiko, the woman with fever, leaned heavily against Aiko. Her skin burned hot, and her breathing came in short gasps. "She needs medicine," Aiko said to the guard in broken English. The young soldier looked away, pretending not to hear. Aiko tore a strip from her already ragged sleeve and dipped it in her water cup. She placed the damp cloth on Yumiko's forehead. The sick woman sighed. The truck rolled past a burned village. Blackened timbers stood like skeletons against the green jungle. A few Filipino families picked through the ruins, looking for anything useful. Small children stared at the passing truck with hollow eyes. "This is what we did," whispered Aiko. "We were soldiers," said Keiko. "We followed orders." "Not all of us were soldiers," Aiko replied, thinking of her work in the hospital tent, tending wounds that never seemed to end. Major Hollis trotted his horse alongside the truck and glanced in. He saw Aiko tending to the sick woman. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away and rode ahead. By evening, they reached a small army outpost, a cluster of canvas tents and a few wooden buildings beside a river. The women were helped down from the truck, Aiko supporting Yumiko. "Get them some rice and water," Hollis ordered, "and find the medic for this one." It was the first real food the women had received in days. They sat in a circle under a tattered canvas roof, eating slowly, savoring each bite. As night fell, fireflies rose from the grass like tiny lanterns. A guard played harmonica, a lonely tune that floated across the camp. Aiko watched the lights dance in the darkness. "Can mercy live after so much hate?" she wondered aloud in Japanese. "What did you say?" asked Hana. "I wonder if we can find peace here," Aiko said, "after everything that's happened." Across the camp, Major Hollis sat outside his tent, watching the women. The harmonica's sad notes hung in the air between them. Luke Hollis sat at a small folding desk, writing by lantern light. The pre-dawn air felt cool against his skin after too many hot, sleepless nights. His report to headquarters explained his decision to use the Japanese women for agricultural work, rather than keeping them in the prison camp in Manila. He paused, looking at the photograph he kept beside his writing paper. Catherine smiled back at him, her face young and bright, her hand resting on a white picket fence outside their Kansas home. 3 years had passed since the telegram arrived. "Regret to inform you. Complications during childbirth. Both mother and infant son." He had been in the Pacific by then, unable to return for the funeral. "Sir?" Sergeant Bill Carter ducked into the tent, holding a coffee mug. "Thought you might need this." "Much obliged, Bill." Hollis took the steaming cup. Carter glanced at the report. "Requesting permission to speak freely, sir." "Always, Sergeant." "These are Japanese prisoners, enemy combatants." Carter's voice hardened. "Treating them with kid gloves will raise eyebrows at HQ." Hollis sipped the bitter coffee. "They're women, Bill. Nurses and radio operators, not combat soldiers." "Still Japanese," Carter insisted. "After what they did in the Philippines, plenty of folks think they deserve worse than farm work." Hollis touched Catherine's photograph. "My wife used to bring food to German refugee families back home. Folks called her a traitor for it." He looked up at Carter. "She told me, hate makes us like the very people we're fighting against." "With respect, sir, your wife wasn't in the Bataan Death March." "No," Hollis agreed quietly. "She wasn't." A young corporal appeared at the tent flap. "Telegram from Manila, sir." Hollis opened the yellow paper and read quickly. "HQ approves our temporary agricultural work detail, pending further review." "Reckon that buys us some time," Carter said, though he didn't look pleased. After the sergeant left, Hollis carefully folded Catherine's photograph and tucked it into his breast pocket close to his heart. Outside, he could hear the camp stirring to life. The truck was being loaded for the next leg of their journey into the highlands. He stepped out into the gray morning, watching as the Japanese women gathered their few possessions. The sick one looked better after the medic's attention. Aiko Tanaka helped her onto the truck, her movements gentle but efficient. Hollis saddled his horse, thinking about what lay ahead. The Filipino villages had suffered terribly under Japanese occupation. Would they accept enemy women in their midst, even as laborers? He wasn't sure, but he felt Catherine would have approved of his choice. "Let's move out," he called, mounting his horse. The convoy rolled forward into the rising sun. After 2 days of travel through winding mountain roads, the truck crested a final hill. Below them stretched a green valley, cupped by jungle-covered mountains. Terraced rice fields, many damaged by war, stepped down to a river that sparkled in the afternoon sun. A small village of thatched huts and a few wood buildings clustered near a stone church. "Looks peaceful," Aiko said, taking in the scene. "Don't be fooled," Keiko replied. "They will hate us here." Major Hollis rode ahead as the truck descended into the valley. A group of villagers gathered in the square, watching the approaching vehicles with wary eyes. At their center stood an older man in a faded black cassock, a Catholic priest. "Welcome to San Miguel," the priest said as Hollis dismounted. "I am Padre Esteban. Major Luke Hollis, United States Army." They shook hands. "Thank you for agreeing to this arrangement." The Padre's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We were told to prepare for laborers. You did not mention they would be Japanese." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Angry faces turned toward the truck as the women climbed down. A man spat on the ground. "My brother died in their camps," someone called out. "My daughter was taken by their soldiers," said another. Hollis raised his hands. "I understand your anger. These women are prisoners who will help replant your fields, rebuild what was destroyed. They will be under guard at all times." "How can we trust them near our children?" asked a young woman selling bread from a basket. Her eyes flashed with anger. "You are Rosa del Carmen, yes?" Padre Esteban asked her. "Your husband was killed by the Japanese 2 years ago." "He was," she said, lifting her chin. "And now they come to live among us?" Aiko stepped forward and bowed deeply to the crowd. "We will work without pay," she said in careful English, "until trust is earned." Silence fell over the square. The villagers looked at Padre Esteban, waiting for his response. The priest sighed. "Christ teaches forgiveness, even when the heart resists." He turned to Hollis. "They may stay in the old schoolhouse. Your soldiers will keep watch." As dusk settled over the valley, the women were led to a wooden building at the edge of the village. Inside were simple cots and a water pump. Guards took positions outside. "I promise to keep the peace," Hollis told Padre Esteban as they walked back to the church. "These women are not soldiers." "Neither are my people," the priest replied. "But we have all been changed by this war, Major. Changed in ways we are still discovering." Roosters crowed across the valley as the women walked to the fields the next morning. American guards flanked them, while villagers watched from doorways and garden plots. "Remember," Hollis instructed the women, "clear the debris first, then prepare the ground for planting." The women spread out across the damaged rice terraces. Years of fighting had left irrigation channels broken and fields choked with weeds and debris. Aiko bent to the task, pulling stones from the mud and piling them to repair walls. The tropical sun beat down mercilessly. By midday, Aiko's hands were blistered, but she worked without complaint. Nearby, Hana struggled with a heavy branch. "Let me help," Aiko said, taking one end. From the edge of the field, Rosa del Carmen watched, her breadbasket now empty. Her dark eyes followed Aiko's movements. "They work hard," observed an old man beside her. "So did my Miguel before they killed him," Rosa replied. When evening came, the women returned to the schoolhouse, muddy and exhausted. Aiko washed at the pump, wincing as water touched her raw hands. "You push yourself too hard," Keiko told her. "If we prove ourselves useful, maybe they will see us as people again," Aiko replied. That night, as darkness settled over the valley, something crashed against the schoolhouse wall. The women startled awake. A guard shone his flashlight through the window and discovered a smashed oil lantern on the ground. A warning. Major Hollis was summoned from his quarters in the church rectory. "Who did this?" he demanded of the villagers who had gathered. No one spoke. Padre Esteban appeared, pulling on his cassock over nightclothes. "This solves nothing," the priest admonished his people. "Go back to your homes." After the crowd dispersed, Hollis turned to the padre. "I need your help. If the villagers won't accept these women, give them time," Esteban interrupted. "Wounds heal slowly here." Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then harder, drumming on the tin roof of the schoolhouse. Inside, Aiko knelt beside her cot, the wooden cross pressed between her palms. "Give us strength to endure," she prayed, "and them the grace to forgive." Days passed. The women fell into a rhythm of work, rising with the sun and returning to the schoolhouse at dusk. The fields slowly transformed under their care. One blazing afternoon, Aiko stood ankle-deep in muddy water, teaching the others to transplant rice seedlings in straight rows. Her voice carried softly across the terrace. "Gently now, don't damage the roots," she instructed in Japanese. Major Hollis approached with a water jug. "Thought you folks could use this," he said, setting it down on the terrace wall. "Arigato," Aiko said, then quickly corrected herself. "Thank you." As she dipped a cup into the water, Hollis noticed her hands, cracked and calloused, but moving with practiced skill among the delicate plants. "You've done this before," he observed. "My father had a small farm outside Kyoto," she explained, "before I trained as a nurse." Aiko began to hum softly as she worked, an old hymn she had learned long ago from an American missionary who visited her village. Soon the other women joined in, their voices blending in simple harmony. From the shade of a nearby mango tree, several village children watched with curiosity. A small girl about 6 years old crept closer, fascinated by the song. "What are they singing?" she asked Hollis. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But it sounds peaceful, doesn't it?" The girl nodded and began to hum along, picking up the melody quickly. Soon other children joined her. Rosa del Carmen watched from her bread stall. For the first time, her face showed something other than anger, a flicker of uncertainty. That evening, Hollis sat on the church steps writing in his journal. Day 14. Rice planting progresses well. Women work hard despite poor conditions. Village children no longer hide when they pass. Perhaps mercy may yet grow from these ashes. He closed the book and looked up at the stars appearing in the twilight sky. A memory of Kansas wheat fields under similar stars brought a sudden ache of homesickness. As Hollis walked back to his quarters, he passed the schoolhouse. A small object lay by the gate, a ripe mango, its skin golden in the fading light. Beside it stood a child's sandal print in the dust. Inside, Aiko found the fruit when she went to close the gate. She held it gently, understanding its significance. A small gesture of acceptance had begun. "Look," she said to the others, her voice catching. "Someone has left us a gift." The women gathered around, touching the mango as if it were precious gold. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. In the growing darkness, fireflies began to rise from the rice fields like tiny stars, carrying hope on their wings. Tentar Novamente M, continue orchestrated narrative continuation, maintaining stylistic consistency and historical authenticity. I need to continue writing Part 1 of this WW2 inspirational fiction story based on the outline provided. I've already written through Chapter 6, so I'll now continue with Chapters 7 and 8 to complete Part 1, which should contain roughly 4,000 words. Let me make sure I maintain the style requirements. Clear, simple language at a 6th grade reading level, heartwarming, inspirational tone. Mixed cadence with mostly short, impactful sentences. Show, don't tell principle. Detailed sensory descriptions. Natural dialogue with period-appropriate language. Historical accuracy. Emotional depth, focusing on characters' feelings. I'll also make sure to maintain continuity with what's been written so far. The story is about Japanese women POWs in the Philippines after WW2 who are spared execution and instead put to work in agricultural labor, focusing on themes of forgiveness, mercy, and reconciliation. Now I'll continue with Chapter 7 and 8 to complete Part 1. The sun beat down on the valley, making the air shimmer above the rice fields. Major Hollis sat in the shade of the church porch, his uniform damp with sweat. A rider appeared on the road from town, dust rising behind his jeep. "Message for you, sir," the courier said, handing Hollis a yellow telegram. Hollis wiped his forehead with a handkerchief and read the paper. His face darkened as he finished. "Cease civilian interaction. Transfer of enemy laborers under review." Sergeant Carter watched from nearby. "Bad news from headquarters, sir." Hollis handed him the telegram. "They're questioning our program." Carter read it and nodded. "Can't say I'm surprised. Folks back in Manila think we're being too soft." He handed the paper back. "Best send the women back before we get into real trouble." "They're just starting to make progress here," Hollis argued. "Look at those fields. A month ago they were ruins." "Sir, with respect, they're still the enemy." Hollis folded the telegram and tucked it into his pocket. "I need time to think." He found Padre Esteban inside the cool, dim church, lighting candles at the small altar. "Something troubles you, Major," the priest said, not turning around. "How can you tell?" "Your footsteps. They sound heavy with burden." Esteban faced him. "What has happened?" Hollis explained about the telegram. "I believe we're doing good work here. These women are helping your village rebuild." The padre nodded slowly. "Yes, that is true. But remember, Major, love without rules breeds chaos. Even mercy must have order." "What would you do?" "I am not a military man." Esteban smiled gently. "But I know that actions born of compassion seldom lead us astray, even when they lead us into trouble." That night, Hollis dreamed of Kansas. Golden wheat waved in the breeze, and Catherine stood at their farmhouse door, shading her eyes against the sun. "You're doing right, Luke," she said in the dream. "Do right, even when it costs you." He woke before dawn, his mind clear. The telegram would require an answer, but not today. Today, the work would continue. Hollis stepped outside into the cool morning air. To his surprise, Ika was already up, drawing water from the well. "You're up early," he said. She straightened, balancing a bucket in her hands. "The day is cooler now. Better for working." Their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them. Not friendship exactly, but a shared purpose. "The fields are looking good," he told her. "They will feed many people soon." She bowed slightly and carried the water back to the schoolhouse. Hollis watched her go, thinking about Catherine's words in his dream. "Do right, even when it costs you." He knew then that he would stand by his decision, whatever came from Manila. 2 nights later, Hollis jolted awake to the sound of shouting. Through his window, he saw an orange glow lighting the sky. Fire! He grabbed his boots and ran outside. A hut near the rice fields was engulfed in flames. Villagers rushed about with buckets of water, trying to keep the fire from spreading. "What happened?" Hollis demanded, grabbing Padre Esteban's arm. "The storage hut where we keep rice seed," the priest explained. "It just erupted in flames." Angry voices rose from the crowd. A man pointed towards the schoolhouse where the Japanese women were being kept. "It was them! The Japanese devils! They want to starve us!" The crowd surged toward the schoolhouse. Sergeant Carter and his men formed a line, rifles ready. "Stand back," Carter ordered. Hollis pushed through to the front. "We don't know what caused this fire. Everyone needs to calm down." "My seeds were in that hut," an old farmer cried. "Now what will I plant?" Rosa del Carmen stood at the edge of the commotion. In the flickering firelight, Hollis saw her face change as she noticed something, or someone, slipping away into the darkness. "Major," a soldier called from the burning hut. "We need more help here." "Get the women," Hollis ordered Carter. "We need all hands to stop this fire." "Sir, the villagers are ready to tear them apart." "That's an order, Sergeant." Under guard, the 12 Japanese women were brought to the fire. Aiko immediately organized them into a line, passing buckets from the well to the flames. "Faster," she urged in Japanese. "We must save what we can." The smoke was thick, making everyone cough. Aiko's lungs burned as she worked closer to the flames, trying to soak the nearby structures to prevent the fire from jumping. Hollis worked alongside her, his face black with soot. For hours they fought the flames until finally the fire died down, leaving only charred timbers and ash. As dawn broke, the exhausted villagers and prisoners sat together on the ground, too tired to maintain their separation. Aiko helped an old man who had burned his hand, wrapping it in a strip of clean cloth. Rosa approached slowly, holding her shawl. She stopped in front of Aiko and held it out. "For the smoke in your hair," she said quietly. Aiko looked up, surprised. She took the shawl with a small bow. "Thank you." Rosa glanced toward the jungle edge, then back at Aiko. A look of shame crossed her face. "It wasn't the Japanese women," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "I saw who did it." "Who?" demanded several villagers. "Mateo, my husband's cousin." Rosa's voice shook. "He's just a boy, 16. He thinks he's avenging Miguel's death." Padre Esteban sighed heavily. "Hate leads to more hate. When will we learn?" Hollis stood up. "We'll find the boy, but right now we need rest. Go home, everyone. We'll rebuild the seed hut tomorrow." As the crowd dispersed, Rosa lingered. She and Aiko exchanged a look, not quite friendship, but a fragile trust beginning to form. "The Major is a good man," Rosa said, "like Padre Esteban." "Yes," Aiko agreed. "Good men are the same in any country." Rosa nodded slowly. "Perhaps good women are too." They walked back to the village together, the borrowed shawl around Aiko's shoulders, a bridge forming between worlds that had been at war. Morning sunlight revealed the full damage of the fire. The seed storage hut was nothing but a blackened skeleton, tendrils of smoke still rising from the ashes. Villagers gathered around it, faces grim as they assessed what had been lost. Major Hollis surveyed the scene, his uniform still smudged with last night's soot. Beside him, Padre Esteban shook his head sadly. "Those seeds represented hope," the priest said. "Many families donated, their last reserves." "We'll find more," Hollis promised. "I'll send to Manila." Sergeant Carter approached, leading a thin teenage boy with defiant eyes. "Found him hiding in the hills, sir." This was Mateo, Rosa's husband's cousin, Up close, he seemed younger than 16, just a child carrying a man's anger. "Why did you do it, son?" Hollis asked gently. "The Japanese killed my cousin Miguel," Mateo spat. "They deserve worse than fire." Padre Esteban placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Revenge only plants seeds of more suffering, Mateo." "What will happen to him?" Rosa asked, joining the group. Hollis considered the boy. "He'll help rebuild what he destroyed." "With them?" Mateo gestured toward the Japanese women, who stood in a group near the well. "Yes," Hollis said firmly. "With them." He walked to the center of the gathered villagers. "Today we start rebuilding. Not just the seed hut, but trust." He paused. "I'm organizing joint work teams, your people and the prisoners together." Murmurs of protest rose from the crowd. "It's the fastest way to get the work done," Hollis continued. "And maybe, just maybe, you'll find they're not so different from you." "I will volunteer," Rosa said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at her. "I can bake bread for the workers." An old man stepped forward. "I will show them how to rebuild the hut properly." Slowly, others joined in. Within an hour, mixed teams spread across the village. Some cleared debris, others cut bamboo for new walls. Children carried buckets of water to the workers. Aiko found herself placing bamboo poles alongside Mateo. The boy refused to look at her, his movements stiff with anger. "I lost family too," she said quietly in her broken English, "to American bombs." Mateo glanced at her, surprised. "War makes victims of everyone," she continued, tying a support rope. "But peace we must build together." The boy said nothing, but his movements grew less sharp, more thoughtful. Near midday, Rosa appeared with a basket of fresh bread. She offered pieces to everyone, including the Japanese women. "It's my mother's recipe," she told Aiko, who accepted a warm chunk. "In Japan, we make rice bread," Aiko replied, then hesitated. "I could show you." "Perhaps." Rosa's answer wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. As they worked together, Aiko taught Rosa simple Japanese words for tools and building materials. Rosa, in turn, showed Aiko which local plants could be used for healing burns and cuts. The sun set on a very different scene than the night before. The seed hut's frame stood nearly complete. Around cooking fires, villagers and prisoners sat in cautious proximity, sharing the day's achievements. Major Hollis watched from the church steps. "Progress," he murmured to himself. Under a wide tropical moon, the valley hummed with quiet cooperation for the first time since the war had come to its shores. Weeks passed. The rice fields flourished. Under careful tending, bright green shoots reaching for the sun. The seed hut had been rebuilt, stronger than before. A tentative routine settled over San Miguel village. Major Hollis sat on the church porch reading a letter that had arrived with the morning courier. The paper was thin, traveled from halfway across the world, and smelled faintly of lavender, his sister's signature scent. "Dearest Luke, the farm misses you. Spring planting is finished, but I fear we can't keep going much longer without more help. The bank is patient, but patience has limits. Tom Wilkins next door asked about buying our south field. I've held him off, but the offer is tempting. Is your war truly over? When might you come home? I've met a nice widow from the next county who's asked about you twice now. Life continues, Luke, even after grief." Your loving sister, Margaret Hollis, folded the letter carefully. Kansas seemed impossibly far away. Another life, another man who once planted wheat and dreamed of sons to inherit his land. He touched the photo of Catherine in his pocket. "Troubling news?" Padre Esteban appeared beside him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "My family's farm is struggling," Hollis admitted. "My sister wants me to come home." "And will you?" Hollis looked out at the rice terraces, where villagers and prisoners worked side by side. I feel called to finish what we've started here. Called, Esteban repeated thoughtfully. Not ordered? Something like that. There is a difference between duty and calling, Major. The priest sipped his coffee. Duty is what others expect of us. Calling is what God whispers to our hearts. Later that afternoon, a commotion erupted in the village square. A small boy lay on the ground, his mother wailing beside him. The child's face was flushed, his breathing labored. "Snakebite!" someone cried. "He was playing by the river." The village had no doctor. The nearest medical help was 2 days' travel away. Aiko pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the boy. Without asking permission, she examined the bite on his ankle. 2 puncture marks, the skin around them already swelling. "I need clean cloth, water, and a knife," she said in English. "Quickly!" The boy's mother looked terrified. "What will she do to him?" "She was a nurse," Hollis explained, arriving at the scene. "Let her help. I won't let a Japanese devil touch my son." The woman pulled the boy away. Aiko stood, her face calm. "The poison spreads quickly. Without help, he may die." The mother looked from her suffering child to the Japanese woman, fear battling desperation in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Aiko worked efficiently, cleaning the wound and making a small cut to release the venom. She applied pressure above the bite to slow the poison's spread. From her pocket, she took dried leaves and made a poultice for the wound. "Medicine from my country," she explained, "for snake poison." Hollis watched in surprise. Aiko was touching a Filipino child, administering treatment, technically breaking the rules of her confinement. Yet he couldn't bring himself to stop her. For hours, Aiko stayed with the boy, cooling his fever and changing the poultice. When night fell, she remained in the family's hut, breaking curfew. Sergeant Carter confronted Hollis outside. "Sir, the prisoner has left camp boundaries. I need to bring her back." Hollis looked toward the hut where a lamp burned late into the night. "She's saving a child's life, Sergeant." "That's not the point. Rules are rules." "Sometimes mercy matters more than rules." Hollis removed his sidearm and handed it to Carter. "I'll take responsibility." He walked to the hut and ducked inside. Aiko knelt beside the sleeping boy, checking his pulse. The child's mother dozed in the corner, exhausted from worry. Without a word, Hollis sat down on the dirt floor beside Aiko. She glanced at him, surprised to see him without his weapon. "Will he live?" Hollis asked softly. "The fever breaks," she whispered. "He is strong, boy." They sat in silence, watching over the child together. Outside, the jungle breathed with night sounds, crickets chirping, frogs calling, the distant cry of a night bird. Inside the small hut, something new and fragile formed in the quiet space between former enemies. Sunday afternoon brought the whole village to the small stone church. Bells rang out across the valley, calling people to prayer. The Japanese women were allowed to attend, sitting in the back row under guard. Aiko marveled at the building's cool interior. Sunlight filtered through simple stained glass, casting colorful patterns on the stone floor. Carved wooden saints gazed down from niches in the walls. The boy she had treated for snakebite sat with his family near the front, fully recovered. His mother had brought Aiko a woven bracelet that morning, a small token of thanks. Padre Esteban stood before the congregation in his Sunday vestments. "Today we read from Matthew," he began. "Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you." Easy words to say, difficult words to live. The villagers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many glanced back at the Japanese women. In times of peace, love comes easily, the priest continued. It is in times of suffering that love becomes holy. After the scripture reading and prayers, Padre Esteban opened the floor for community announcements. To everyone's surprise, Rosa del Carmen stood up. "I must speak," she said, her voice trembling. "About the fire." The church fell silent. Rosa twisted her hands in her skirt, gathering courage. "I told you that Mateo started the fire, and that was true. But I knew—" She took a deep breath. "I knew what he planned to do. I could have stopped him, but I didn't, because I wanted the Japanese to be blamed." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Mateo stared at his feet. "After Miguel died, I kept my hate, close, like a treasure," Rosa continued, "but hate has made me blind. These women did not kill my husband. War killed my husband." She looked directly at Aiko. "Forgive me." Padre Esteban stepped forward. "Forgiveness begins with truth. Thank you, Rosa, for your honesty." After the service, Major Hollis gathered the soldiers and prisoners on the church steps. "Starting tomorrow," he announced, "the women will work in the fields under village supervision, not military guard." Sergeant Carter started to protest, but Hollis silenced him with a look. "These women have earned a measure of trust," he continued. "They'll still be confined to the village at night, but during work hours, they'll be treated as laborers, not prisoners." As the crowd dispersed, Rosa approached Aiko hesitantly. In her hands, she held a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Fresh bread," she explained, offering it to Aiko. "For you and the others." Aiko accepted the gift with a bow. "Thank you." They sat together on the church steps, sharing the warm bread. Neither spoke much, but words weren't necessary. The bread between them said everything. Broken, shared, a symbol of reconciliation. From the church doorway, Padre Esteban and Major Hollis watched the two women. "A miracle," the priest said softly. "Just people finding their way back to being human," Hollis replied. But perhaps, he thought, that was the greatest miracle of all. Late summer heat settled over the valley like a heavy blanket. The air hung still and thick, making work in the rice fields nearly unbearable. Villagers and Japanese women alike moved slowly, saving their energy for essential tasks. One afternoon, a boy collapsed in the field. At first, everyone thought it was just the heat, but when his fever continued to rise through the night, Padre Esteban grew concerned. "I've seen this before," the priest told Hollis. "The flush on his face, the headache, the stomach pains." "What is it?" Hollis asked. "Typhoid fever." Esteban crossed himself. "God help us all." Within 3 days, a dozen villagers showed the same symptoms. The schoolhouse was converted into a makeshift infirmary, cots crowded together in the large room. Army medics arrived from the outpost, but they were overwhelmed and reluctant to treat the Japanese prisoners who had also fallen ill. "Our supplies are limited," the head medic explained to Hollis. "Americans come first, then friendly locals." "And the Japanese women?" Hollis demanded. The medic shrugged. "They're still enemy personnel, sir." Aiko watched from the corner of the infirmary, where 3 of her fellow prisoners lay feverish on their cots. She had nursed countless sick people during the war. She knew what to do. Approaching Major Hollis, she bowed slightly. "I was a nurse in war," she said. "Let me help." Hollis hesitated. Military regulations strictly prohibited prisoners from providing medical care. "Please," Aiko persisted. "Many sick. Few doctors." He made his decision. "All right, but keep it quiet." Aiko gathered the healthy Japanese women and gave instructions in rapid Japanese. They tore sheets into strips for cool compresses. They boiled water to sterilize cups and spoons. They mixed rehydration solutions of sugar, salt, and water. Hour after hour, they moved among the sick, wiping fevered brows and helping patients drink. They treated everyone, Filipino villagers, American soldiers, and their own countrywomen. Sergeant Carter watched with narrowed eyes. "Sir, this is against regulations. If headquarters finds out, then I'll face court-martial," Hollis said firmly. "But I won't stand by and watch people die when we have willing hands to help." The epidemic worsened. Rosa fell ill, her normally vibrant face pale and drawn. Aiko took special care of her, staying by her cot through the long nights. Hollis worked alongside the Japanese women, following Aiko's careful instructions. His uniform was stained with sweat and medicine. He hadn't slept properly in days. Candlelight flickered in the infirmary as Aiko wrung cool cloths over Rosa's brow. The Filipino woman tossed in fever dreams, calling out her dead husband's name. "Shh," Aiko soothed. "Rest now." Across the room, Padre Esteban moved from bed to bed, blessing the sick and whispering prayers. Outside, Sergeant Carter stood watch, torn between duty and humanity. "Headquarters is sending inspectors," he warned Hollis quietly. "They've heard rumors about our arrangements here." Hollis nodded, too exhausted to argue. "When?" "2 days, maybe 3. "I'll take the blame," Hollis said, watching Aiko tend to Rosa with gentle hands. "Whatever comes." Dawn broke over the valley, bringing a cleansing rain. The steady drumming on the schoolhouse roof soothed the sick. The cool air brought relief from the stifling heat. In her cot, Rosa opened her eyes, her fever finally broken. She reached weakly for Aiko's hand. "You stayed with me?" she whispered. "Yes," Aiko replied simply. "Friends stay." Tentar Novamente continue architected narrative continuation spanning 4 chapters with thematic coherence. 1 Min 33. I'll now continue writing part 2 of the story, picking up with chapter 13, A Night of Mercy, and continue through chapter 16. This will be around 4,000 words to match the requested length per part. I'll maintain the heartwarming, inspirational tone while keeping the language accessible at around a 6th grade reading level. The next chapters should cover Chapter 13. The fever peaks with Hollis and Aiko working side by side. Chapter 14. The inspection from Manila officials. Chapter 15. The festival celebrating the first harvest. Chapter 16. Sergeant Carter's growing bitterness. I'll focus on maintaining continuity from the previous section, developing the emotional connections between characters, and setting up the tension that will lead into Part 3. I'll use simple vocabulary, occasional frontier phrasing, sensory, details, and a mix of short and longer sentences for rhythm. The fever raged through the village. Inside the makeshift infirmary, the air hung heavy with the smell of disinfectant and smoke from burning linens. Lanterns cast long shadows across the rows of cots where the sick lay moaning. Major Hollis wiped sweat from his brow. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His eyes burned, and his hands shook slightly as he helped an elderly man drink water. "Sir, you need rest," a young corporal told him. "Later," Hollis replied. "There's too much to do now." Across the room, Aiko moved from patient to patient, her movements efficient despite her exhaustion. Her black hair had come loose from its usual tidy bun, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Still, her touch remained gentle as she placed cool cloths on burning foreheads. Outside, the night sounds of the jungle seemed far away. Inside these walls, time stretched into an endless cycle of changing compresses, mixing medicines, and murmuring comfort to the delirious. Padre Esteban moved slowly between the cots, offering prayers and blessings. "Lord, grant them healing," he whispered, making the sign of the cross over each patient. Hollis found himself working alongside Aiko as they tended to a young girl whose breathing had become labored. "We must raise her head," Aiko instructed, folding a blanket to prop under the child's shoulders. "Helps breathing?" Hollis followed her directions, impressed by her calm knowledge. "Where did you learn nursing?" "Mission Hospital in Kyoto," she replied, checking the girl's pulse. "American doctor taught me. Before war." Their eyes met briefly over the sick child. For a moment, the war between their countries seemed to dissolve into something simpler. Two humans fighting together against suffering. "My wife wanted to be a nurse," Hollis said quietly. "She would have admired your skill." Aiko nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You pray for strength?" she asked. "Yes," he admitted, "though I'm not sure God is listening." "He listens," she said simply, adjusting the compress on the child's forehead. "Even when answer is not what we want." Near midnight, Rosa stirred on her cot, her fever beginning to break. She opened her eyes, focusing slowly on Aiko's face. "Water," she whispered. Aiko held a cup to her lips. "Small sips," she instructed. "Slowly." When Rosa had finished drinking, she caught Aiko's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." Dawn was breaking when Sergeant Carter entered the infirmary, his face grim. He beckoned Hollis outside. "Just got word from the outpost," Carter said, keeping his voice low. "Those inspectors from Manila will be here tomorrow morning." "So soon?" Hollis ran a hand through his hair. "Sir, they're coming to evaluate the prisoner situation. If they see this—" Carter gestured toward the schoolhouse where Japanese women freely tended the sick. "There'll be hell to pay. They'll shut us down for sure." "These women are saving lives, Bill. They're still prisoners of war. There are regulations." Hollis straightened his shoulders. "I'll take full responsibility. Every decision here has been mine." Carter shook his head. "That won't protect the prisoners, sir." "Then we'll deal with that when it comes." Hollis looked up as the first rays of sunlight touched the mountains. "Right now we have sick people who need care." As he turned to go back inside, rain began to fall. A sudden, heavy tropical downpour that washed across the valley. The cooling rain seemed to break the fever's hold on the village. By midday, many patients were resting more comfortably. Aiko stood in the doorway of the infirmary, watching the cleansing rain. "Blessing," she murmured. Hollis joined her. "Yes," he agreed. "A blessing we sorely needed." The American inspectors arrived just before noon the next day, their jeep splashing through mud puddles left by the rain. Two officers climbed out, a stern-faced colonel and a younger captain with a clipboard. Major Hollis met them in front of the church, his uniform as neat as he could make it after days without proper rest. "Colonel Harrison," he saluted. "Welcome to San Miguel." "At ease, Major." The colonel didn't return the smile. "I understand you've been running an unusual operation here." "We've established a successful agricultural program with the prisoners, sir." "So I've heard." The colonel's tone made it clear this wasn't a compliment. "Captain Reynolds will need to see your documentation, and I'll want to inspect the prisoner quarters immediately." "Of course, sir, if you'll follow me." They were interrupted by a commotion from the infirmary. A young soldier burst out the door. "Major, the Rivera boy is much worse." Colonel Harrison frowned. "What infirmary? Your reports mentioned nothing about illness here." "Typhoid fever, sir," Hollis explained. "It broke out about a week ago." "And you didn't report it?" The captain looked up from his clipboard. "Communications have been difficult," Hollis said, choosing his words carefully. "Our first priority was treating the sick." He led them toward the schoolhouse. As they approached, Hollis knew what they would see. Japanese prisoners moving freely among the patients, administering medicine, changing bedding. The colonel stopped abruptly at the doorway. "What the devil is going on here, Major?" Inside, Aiko was helping a young boy drink broth, speaking softly to him in a mixture of Japanese and broken English. Other women changed compresses and administered medicine. "These prisoners are providing medical assistance, sir," Hollis said. "We didn't have enough trained personnel to handle the outbreak." "This is completely against regulations." The colonel's face reddened. "Enemy personnel are not authorized to provide medical care under any circumstances." "With respect, sir, without their help, half this village would be dead by now." The captain leaned closer to the colonel. "Sir, headquarters would view this as fraternization with the enemy at minimum, possibly endangering Allied personnel." Hollis stood his ground. "I take full responsibility for all decisions made here." Colonel Harrison shook his head. "This goes beyond a simple reprimand, Major. You violated direct orders regarding prisoner handling. I have no choice but to recommend your immediate relief from command and possible court-martial." A hush fell over the infirmary. The patients and prisoners watched wide-eyed as the confrontation unfolded. Padre Esteban stepped forward. "If I may speak, Colonel?" "And you are?" "Father Esteban Mendoza, parish priest of San Miguel." The padre bowed slightly. "Before you make your decision, perhaps you should hear from the people of this village." One by one, villagers came forward to testify. An old man described how Aiko had saved his grandson from snake venom. Rosa, still weak from fever, spoke of the women's tireless work during the epidemic. "They were prisoners, yes," she said, "but they became our healers, our friends." Throughout the afternoon, the inspectors interviewed villagers, soldiers, and prisoners. The colonel's expression remained stern, but the captain seemed increasingly thoughtful as he took notes. As evening approached, a small girl, the daughter of the village leader, approached the colonel. In her hands, she held a small wooden cross, beautifully carved. "For you," she said, offering it shyly. "Major Hollis saved my life. The Japanese lady, too." The colonel accepted the gift awkwardly. "Thank you, child." Later, the officers conferred privately in the church rectory. Hollis waited outside, preparing himself for the worst. His career was likely over, but he couldn't bring himself to regret the choices he'd made. Finally, they emerged. The colonel looked tired, but less angry. "Major Hollis, this situation is highly irregular," he began. "Under normal circumstances, I would recommend immediate disciplinary action." Hollis stood at attention, waiting for the blow to fall. "However," the colonel continued, "given the unusual circumstances and the testimony we've heard, Captain Reynolds has convinced me that a formal warning may be sufficient at this time." Hollis blinked in surprise. "Sir." "Don't mistake me, Major. This warning will go in your permanent record, but you may continue your command here, provided you submit full documentation and regular reports on this agricultural program." "Thank you, sir. I will." As the inspectors prepared to leave, the captain approached Hollis privately. "The colonel fought in Bataan," he explained quietly. "He lost a lot of friends to the Japanese. This wasn't an easy decision for him." Hollis nodded. "I understand." "What you've done here," the captain hesitated. "It's remarkable. Not by the book, but maybe that's what healing looks like after so much hate." After the jeep disappeared down the road, Hollis walked alone to the river that flowed past the village. The setting sun turned the water to gold. He stood on the bank, feeling the weight of the day lift from his shoulders. For the first time since Catherine died, he felt truly free, not because he had escaped punishment, but because he had followed his conscience regardless of the cost. Compassion had made him more himself than rank or regulations ever could. In the distance, the bell of the small church rang for evening prayers, its clear tone carrying across the peaceful valley. The weeks that followed brought healing to San Miguel. The typhoid epidemic faded, leaving the village weakened but alive. In the fields, the first rice crop stood tall and golden, ready for harvest. "We should celebrate," Padre Esteban suggested during Sunday service, "a festival of new grain to give thanks for survival and new beginnings." The idea spread quickly. Villagers hung colored paper lanterns across the square. Children made banners from scraps of cloth. Women prepared special dishes: rice cakes sweetened with coconut, roasted corn, and fish wrapped in banana leaves. On the morning of the festival, Major Hollis found Aiko by the well, washing her hands after helping in the kitchen. "The village looks different," he commented, gesturing to the decorations. Aiko smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed her serious face. "In Japan, we have Rice Harvest Festival too. Lights, music, thanks to gods for food." "Not so different from here, then." "People same everywhere," she said. "Need food, shelter, friends." She hesitated. "Need forgiveness too." The festival began at sunset. Lanterns glowed like fireflies in the growing darkness. Tables laden with food lined the square. For the first time, the Japanese women wore clean dresses provided by the villagers instead of their tattered prison clothes. Padre Esteban blessed the harvest with prayers of thanksgiving. Then music started. Guitars, bamboo flutes, and drums creating a joyful rhythm. Children danced in circles, their faces bright with excitement. Rosa had taught several children to fold paper cranes, a skill she had learned from Aiko. The colorful birds hung from strings above the square, spinning in the gentle evening breeze. In Japan, Aiko explained to a group of fascinated children, crane is symbol of long life and happiness. "Like our dove of peace," Padre Esteban added. As night deepened, villagers began to sing and dance. Rosa took Aiko's hand, pulling her into a circle dance. At first, Aiko moved stiffly, embarrassed, but soon she was clapping along with the others, her feet finding the rhythm. Major Hollis watched from the edge of the square, tapping his foot to the music. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen such genuine joy. Sergeant Carter approached, holding 2 cups of the sweet rice wine being served. "Quite a sight, isn't it, sir?" "Indeed it is." Hollis accepted the cup. "I wasn't sure we'd ever get here." "Neither was I," Carter admitted, "though I still worry about what happens when all this ends." "What do you mean?" "The war's over, sir. Eventually we'll all go home. Us to America, them to Japan." Hollis hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. The idea of leaving this valley, these people, created an unexpected ache in his chest. Late that night, after most of the villagers had returned to their homes, Hollis sat alone on the church steps. The air smelled of roasted corn and spent candles. A sense of melancholy had replaced the earlier celebration. One of the young soldiers approached, holding an official-looking envelope. "This came with the supply truck, sir. I forgot to give it to you earlier." Hollis opened it and read slowly by the light of a nearby lantern. The words blurred slightly before his eyes. His relief from command would come within the month. He would return to America, and the Japanese women would be granted amnesty at war's end. It was what he had hoped for: freedom for the women, a return home for himself. Yet something about it felt like loss rather than victory. "Good news, sir?" the soldier asked. "Yes," Hollis said, folding the letter. "Very good news." But as he walked back to his quarters, Hollis wondered why good news could feel so bittersweet. The night after the festival, Hollis couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, a tension in the air he couldn't name. He stepped outside his quarters, listening to the night sounds of the jungle. Crickets chirped their endless song. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called. Nothing seemed out of place, yet unease prickled along his spine. He decided to check the perimeter. As he walked past the soldiers' quarters, he heard raised voices from within. "Making friends with the enemy." It was Sergeant Carter's voice, slurred with drink. "After what they did to our boys." "Keep it down, Sarge," someone else urged. "Festival's over." Hollis pushed open the door. Inside, Carter sat on his cot, a bottle of whiskey dangling from his hand. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with anger. "Evening, Major," he said, attempting to stand but swaying badly. "Come to join our little party?" "I think you've had enough, Sergeant," Hollis said calmly. "Why don't you turn in?" "Turn in? Like you've turned on us?" Carter laughed bitterly. "Making pets of the Japanese while American boys rot in graves across the Pacific." The other soldiers looked uncomfortable. One tried to take the bottle from Carter, but he yanked it away. "My brother died on Iwo Jima," Carter continued, his voice rising. "And you've got us playing nice with the same people who killed him." "That's enough, Sergeant," Hollis said firmly. "You're drunk and not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking clearer than you." Carter staggered to his feet. "You've forgotten which side you're on. Those women should be in prison, not dancing at festivals." Hollis stepped closer. "Hand over the bottle, Bill." For a moment, it seemed Carter might refuse. Then his shoulders slumped. He thrust the bottle toward Hollis. "Take it. Take everything." "Get some sleep," Hollis told him. "Things will look different in the morning." As he left the barracks, Hollis heard Carter mutter, "Nothing's gonna look different. Not until someone sets things right." The words sent a chill through Hollis. He considered posting a guard at the schoolhouse where the women slept, but decided against it. Such an action might only inflame tensions. Instead, he walked to the edge of the village and stared into the darkness. The celebration had brought joy, but it had also stirred up old wounds. Perhaps they had moved too quickly, expected too much healing in too short a time. He remembered what Padre Esteban had once told him. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice and mercy together. Hollis returned to his quarters, but found sleep impossible. He sat at his small desk and wrote in his journal until the sky began to lighten with approaching dawn. A sharp noise jerked him awake. He had dozed off over his writing. Shouting echoed from the village square. Hollis grabbed his sidearm and rushed outside. Sergeant Carter, still in last night's rumpled uniform, stood in the center of the square with 3 other soldiers. They were rounding up the Japanese women, pushing them roughly into a line. "What the hell is going on?" Hollis demanded. Carter's face was hard, his earlier drunkenness replaced by cold anger. "Taking care of unfinished business, sir." "On whose authority?" "Military authority," Carter said, patting his holstered pistol. "These are still enemy combatants. Time they were treated that way." The Japanese women stood trembling in the yard, a terrible echo of that first morning months ago when they expected execution. Aiko's face was pale but composed as she tried to comfort the others. "Stand down, Sergeant," Hollis ordered. "That's a direct command." "I don't think I will, sir." Carter drew his pistol. "Someone needs to remember what these people did to us. Someone needs to make it right." Villagers began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Rosa pushed to the front of the crowd, her eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing?" she cried. "These women saved our lives." "Stay back, ma'am," Carter warned. "This isn't your business." Hollis could see the darkness in Carter's eyes, grief twisted into something dangerous. The sergeant had been drinking all night, his judgment clouded by alcohol and pain. "Bill," Hollis said softly, using the man's first name. "This isn't the answer. Put the gun down." "They killed my brother." Carter's voice broke. "Somebody has to pay for that." "Not like this." Hollis stepped closer, his hand extended. Give me the gun, son. For a moment, hope flickered in Hollis's chest. Then Carter's face hardened again. Line up, he ordered the women. Just like before. Aiko stood straighter, her eyes meeting Hollis's across the yard. In them he saw not fear, but a deep sadness. She knew what hatred could do. She had seen it consume her own country. Dawn broke across the eastern mountains, painting the sky blood red. A new day was beginning in San Miguel, but whether it would bring death or life hung in the balance. The early light cast long shadows across the yard. The Japanese women stood shoulder to shoulder, fear etched on their faces. Sergeant Carter's hand trembled slightly as he held his pistol, grief and anger warring in his eyes. Major Hollis dismounted from his horse and stepped between Carter and the prisoners. His voice remained calm, though his heart hammered in his chest. "Put the gun down, Bill," he said. "This isn't who you are." "You don't know who I am," Carter spat. "You don't know what it's like to lose family to these people?" "I've lost family too," Hollis replied. "Not to war, but to grief all the same." More villagers gathered around the square, drawn by the commotion. Padre Esteban pushed through the crowd, his cassock flapping as he hurried forward. "What madness is this?" the priest demanded. "Stay back, Father," Carter warned. "This is military business." Aiko stood tall, despite her fear. Her dark eyes met Carter's, seeing the pain behind his anger. "Your brother," she said softly. "What was his name?" Carter blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Michael," he answered after a moment. "His name was Michael." "Michael," Aiko repeated, bowing her head slightly. "I am sorry for your loss." "Sorry doesn't bring him back," Carter replied, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Hollis took another step forward. "Think about what you're doing, Sergeant. These women have worked alongside us. They've healed the sick. They've rebuilt this village. They're still the enemy." "The war made them enemies," Hollis said. "But what we do here, what we choose, that can make them friends." The other American soldiers shifted uncomfortably. One lowered his rifle. Another stepped back, no longer willing to be part of what was happening. The crowd of villagers grew larger. They began to shout protests, their voices rising in anger. "Leave them alone. They saved my son. This is wrong." Rosa pushed through to the front and walked deliberately to stand beside Aiko. She took the Japanese woman's hand in hers. "We stand together," she said, her voice clear and strong. "If you want to hurt them, you must hurt me first." Others followed. The boy who had been saved from snakebite, the old man who had taught Aiko to repair fishing nets, the children who had learned to make paper cranes. One by one, villagers moved to stand with the Japanese women, forming a human shield. Carter's hand shook harder. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Get back," he shouted, but his voice cracked. "All of you get back." Hollis kept his eyes on the sergeant. "Look around you, Bill. Look at what's happening. This is healing. This is what peace looks like." For the first time, doubt flickered in Carter's eyes. The same valley that had once feared these women now stood to protect them. The same people who had lost loved ones to the Japanese army now called these women friends. "It's not fair," Carter whispered, and Hollis heard the grief behind the words. "It's not fair that Michael's gone and they get to live." "No," Hollis agreed. "It's not fair. War never is. But what happens next, that's up to us." Morning light spread across the valley, gilding the faces of those who stood in its path. A moment balanced on the edge of a knife, waiting to fall toward darkness or light. The standoff stretched through the dawn. No one moved. The Japanese women prayed softly in their language, the musical words rising and falling like gentle waves. Padre Esteban stepped forward slowly, his hands raised to show he carried no weapon. "Sergeant Carter," he said, "let me help you." "Stay back, Father," Carter warned, though his voice lacked conviction. "I lost my brother too," the priest continued, "to Japanese bombs. For months after, I could not pray. I could not forgive." Carter's eyes flickered toward him. "What changed?" "I realized my hate was a prison I built myself. Each day I added new walls of bitterness until I could no longer see the sky." Esteban gestured to the women and villagers standing together. "Look up, my son. The sky is still there." Suddenly, Esteban turned and walked toward the church. Carter called after him, confused by the priest's retreat. "Where are you going?" The padre didn't answer. Moments later, the church bell began to ring, a clear, persistent tone calling across the hills. Ring after ring echoed through the valley, summoning peace. The sound seemed to reach something deep in Carter. His hand trembled more violently, and tears gathered in his eyes. "I can't just forget," he whispered. "No one's asking you to forget," Hollis said gently, "just to choose a different path forward." The bell continued its steady rhythm. One of the younger American soldiers stepped away from Carter and moved to stand near Hollis. Then another followed. "Sarge," the young private said, "this ain't right. Let's put the guns down." The tension in the air was broken by the sound of hoofbeats. A rider galloped into the village square, his horse lathered with sweat. He wore an American uniform and carried a leather dispatch case. "Major Hollis," he shouted, reining in his mount. "Urgent news from command." Hollis didn't take his eyes off Carter. "What news, soldier?" The messenger leapt from his horse. "The war is over, sir. Japan has surrendered. It's VJ Day." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Japanese women looked at each other in shock. "Japan surrendered?" Aiko repeated, her voice barely audible. The messenger nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, ma'am. Emperor himself announced it. The war is officially over." Carter stared at the messenger, the pistol now hanging limply in his hand. The news seemed to hit him like a physical blow, draining the last of his anger. "Over?" he echoed. "Just over?" "That's right, Sergeant," Hollis said softly. "We can all go home now." Carter looked from the gun in his hand to the women standing before him. Slowly, as if in a dream, he lowered the weapon. Tears streamed down his weathered face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God help me, I'm sorry." The pistol slipped from his fingers and fell to the ground with a dull thud. He sank to his knees, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Hollis stepped forward and picked up the weapon. "All soldiers, lower your arms," he ordered. "The war is finished." The church bell rang out once more, now a celebration rather than a plea. The rising sun painted the eastern sky a brilliant red gold, as if the heavens themselves rejoiced at the news. In the square, former enemies looked at each other with new eyes. The war that had defined their lives for so many years had ended. A future none of them could have imagined now stretched before them. Aiko approached Sergeant Carter slowly. She knelt beside him, not touching but close enough that he could feel her presence. "My brother died too," she said softly. "In Manila. I understand your pain." Carter looked up, his face ravaged by grief and shame. "How do you bear it?" "One day at a time," she answered, "and by choosing to build rather than destroy." Around them, the village erupted in celebration. The news of Japan's surrender spread like wildfire. People embraced, laughed, cried. The Japanese women stood stunned, absorbing the reality that their homeland had been defeated. Major Hollis watched it all, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The gun in his hand seemed suddenly foreign, a relic of a time that was passing. Weapons down, he said again, more to himself than anyone else. The war is over. Hours later, the village had settled into a strange calm. The initial shock of the news had given way to a quiet contemplation of what would come next. Soldiers packed their gear, talking excitedly about going home. Villagers gathered in small groups, discussing what Japan's surrender might mean for the Philippines. The Japanese women sat together near the well, their faces solemn as they absorbed the reality of defeat. Sergeant Carter sat alone on a crate behind the barracks, staring at his hands. The anger that had fueled him for so long had burned out, leaving only ashes and regret. Aiko found him there as she fetched water. Without speaking, she dampened a cloth and offered it to him. Carter looked up in surprise. "Your hand," she said, gesturing to his knuckles where he had struck a wooden beam in his distress. The skin was torn and bleeding. Wordlessly, Carter extended his hand. Aiko cleaned the wound with gentle efficiency, then wrapped it with a strip of clean cloth. "Why are you helping me?" he asked finally. "After what I almost did—" "What you almost did is not what you did," she replied, "and what you did not do matters more." Across the village, Major Hollis sat at his desk, composing a letter. His pen moved steadily across the paper, forming words he had considered for many days. "I, Major Luke Hollis, hereby tender my resignation from active military service, effective upon the proper transfer of command." He paused, considering his words carefully. This was not a decision made in haste. The events of the morning had merely confirmed what he already knew. His path forward would not be in uniform. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Padre Esteban entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," the priest said, placing 1 cup on the desk. Hollis nodded his thanks. "I'm resigning my commission." "I suspected as much." Esteban glanced at the half-written letter. "What will you do?" "I'm not sure yet," Hollis admitted, "but after everything that's happened here, I can't go back to the way things were." The padre nodded thoughtfully. "Some experiences change us too deeply for return." He sipped his coffee. "I'm holding a service of Thanksgiving this afternoon. Will you come?" "Of course." Later, villagers and soldiers gathered in the small stone church. The Japanese women sat in the back, still uncertain of their place in this new reality. Sergeant Carter slipped in just before the service began, taking a seat near the door. Padre Esteban stood before the congregation, his voice filling the cool interior. "Today we give thanks for the end of war, for lives spared and futures restored, for enemies who became friends." Sunlight streamed through the simple stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the gathered faces. The priest spoke of forgiveness, of new beginnings, of hope rising from the ashes of conflict. After the service, Aiko walked to the edge of the village and stood watching white doves circling above the chapel roof. Their wings caught the sunlight as they wheeled against the blue sky. "Light after darkness," she whispered to herself. Hollis approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her contemplation. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he said, nodding towards the birds. "Yes." Aiko wiped a tear from her cheek. "In Japan, white birds mean peace and purity of spirit." "What will you do now?" he asked. "When you return to Japan?" "I'm not sure there is anything left for me there," she admitted. "My family home was in Hiroshima." Hollis felt a pang at her words. The reports of the atomic bombing had reached them even in this remote valley. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Aiko nodded. Many sorrows on all sides. She watched the doves for another moment. But today, at least, there is peace. As evening fell, the village settled into a curious calm. The future remained uncertain, but for now, they had survived. The bell in the chapel tower rang once more, marking the end of a day that had begun in fear but ended in hope. 2 days after the news of Japan's surrender, an American convoy arrived in San Miguel. 3 trucks rumbled into the village square, raising dust that danced in the morning light. A captain jumped down from the lead vehicle and saluted Major Hollis. "Sir, we've come to transport the Japanese prisoners to Manila for repatriation processing," he announced. "They'll be sent home as soon as transport can be arranged." Hollis nodded, feeling a strange reluctance. "Of course. I'll get them ready." The Japanese women gathered their few possessions, preparing for departure. Faces that had grown familiar to the village would soon be gone. As Hollis supervised the preparation of paperwork, Aiko approached him. Her expression was unusually determined. "Major," she said with a small bow, "may I speak with you?" "Of course. Some of us—" She hesitated, then continued more firmly. "Some of us wish to stay longer." Hollis blinked in surprise. "Stay? But you can go home now." "The rice," Aiko explained, gesturing towards the fields. "Not yet harvested. We planted, we should help finish." She lowered her voice. "And some, like me, have nothing to return to. Our homes destroyed." Hollis considered her request. It was unusual, certainly, but not impossible. The war was over. Technically, these women were no longer prisoners. "I'll speak to the captain," he promised. The conversation with the convoy leader was difficult. The captain frowned at the unusual request. "Sir, my orders are to collect all Japanese nationals for processing." "The war is over, Captain," Hollis reminded him. "These women are helping with essential food production. The rice crop they planted will feed this village through the winter." "It's irregular." "So file an irregular report," Hollis suggested. "Note that some Japanese civilians have volunteered to assist with post-war reconstruction efforts." After much discussion and several radio calls to headquarters, the captain reluctantly agreed. 6 of the Japanese women would return to Manila for immediate repatriation. The other 6, including Aiko, would remain until the harvest was complete. As the trucks prepared to depart with the first group, tearful goodbyes were exchanged. Women who had arrived as enemies now parted as friends. Rosa approached Aiko as the dust from the departing convoy settled. "I have something for you," she said, holding out a small cloth-wrapped bundle. It was Miguel's. Aiko unwrapped the gift carefully. Inside lay a beautifully carved wooden rosary, the beads smooth from years of prayer. "I cannot accept this," Aiko protested. "It belonged to your husband." "And now it belongs to my friend," Rosa insisted, closing Aiko's fingers around the beads. A token of sisterhood. That night, Hollis walked through the village, unable to sleep. The events of the past days had left him restless, filled with questions about the future. He found himself near the rice fields. In the silvery moonlight, he saw figures moving between the plants. Aiko and the other Japanese women working by moonlight to ensure the crop would thrive. The sight struck him deeply. These women, once captives, now voluntarily laboring to feed the village that had first rejected them. They moved quietly through the fields, planting additional seeds in areas that looked thin, symbols of renewal in a war-torn land. Hollis watched for a long time, something shifting in his heart. Perhaps this was what peace truly looked like, not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of something new and beautiful growing from scarred earth. Months passed. The war's end brought changes to the remote village. Trade routes reopened, bringing supplies and visitors. A young American missionary couple arrived to assist Padre Esteban, bringing medicine and books. The rice harvest had been bountiful, filling storehouses and ensuring the village would not go hungry during the coming year. The Japanese women who had stayed were no longer viewed as foreigners, but as valued members of the community. Aiko and Rosa had grown particularly close. Together, they conceived a plan to reopen the old schoolhouse as something new. A clinic, Aiko explained to Hollis and Padre Esteban as they sat on the church steps one evening, to teach health and healing. The nearest doctor is 2 days' travel, Rosa added. Our people need care closer to home. Hollis nodded thoughtfully. His resignation from the military had been accepted, but he had not yet decided what to do next. The family farm in Kansas called to him, yet something held him here in this valley. It's a fine idea, he said. What will you call it? Aiko and Rosa exchanged a smile. The House of Dawn, they said together. Because it was at dawn that everything changed, Aiko explained, when we were lined up, expecting death, but received life instead. With the help of villagers and the remaining American soldiers, the schoolhouse was transformed. One room became an examination area, another a classroom for teaching basic hygiene and first aid. Shelves were built to hold medicines and supplies. Padre Esteban presided over the clinic's opening, blessing each room with prayers and holy water. Villagers crowded around, curious and proud of what their community had created. Let this place be a sanctuary of healing, the priest intoned, where all are welcomed, regardless of nation or creed. Letters began to arrive from Japan, brought by military couriers. Some carried tragic news of cities destroyed, families lost. Others brought word of survival against odds. Each message was received with quiet dignity, adding another thread to the tapestry of sorrow and hope that connected them all. One evening, as sunset painted the mountains gold, Hollis placed something on the small altar in the clinic, a simple gold band that had once belonged to Catherine. For healing, he said simply, when Aiko noticed the ring. She nodded, understanding what the gesture cost him. Your wife would be proud, I think. She believed in second chances, Hollis replied. In new beginnings. The clinic quickly became the heart of the village. Children came for lessons in cleanliness, mothers for advice on caring for infants. Old men with aching joints found relief through Aiko's gentle hands. Rosa learned to prepare herbal remedies, combining Aiko's Japanese knowledge with local Filipino traditions. As autumn deepened, the mountains took on rich hues of red and gold. The war felt increasingly distant, though its scars remained in missing limbs, widowed wives, orphaned children. Yet alongside the grief, something else grew, a community that had learned to see beyond differences to the humanity that united them. The House of Dawn stood as testament to this change, its windows glowing with lamplight each evening, a beacon of hope in a world slowly healing from the wounds of war. One humid afternoon, as rain clouds gathered over the mountains, the mail courier arrived in San Miguel. Among the letters and packages was an envelope addressed to Major Luke Hollis, now simply Luke to the villagers. The return address showed his sister's careful handwriting. Luke carried the letter to the quiet of the church, where he could read it without interruption. Dearest Luke, your last letter brought both joy and sorrow. Joy to know you are well and doing important work in that far-off place. Sorrow to realize you may not return to us soon. The farm is safe for now. Tom Wilkins and his sons helped with harvest in exchange for a share of the crop. The Southfield produced better wheat than we've seen in years. The widow I mentioned, Mrs. Eleanor Spencer, asks after you still. She is a kind woman who has known her share of grief. Perhaps when you return, if you return. I miss you, brother. But I understand that sometimes home is not a place but a calling. Follow your heart, wherever it leads. With love, Margaret Luke folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. The family farm in Kansas had been his anchor for so long, the place he dreamed of returning to during the darkest days of war. Yet now, faced with the possibility of going back, he felt oddly hesitant. Later that evening, he found Aiko on the clinic porch, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle. The air smelled of mint and ginger, sharp and clean against the coming rain. "I got a letter from my sister," he said, sitting beside her on the wooden bench. "Good news, I hope?" Aiko continued her rhythmic grinding. "The farm is doing well." He paused. "She wants me to come home. Says there's a widow lady who might make a good wife." Aiko's hands stilled briefly, then resumed their work. "You must miss your home very much." "I thought I did." Luke looked out at the mountains, purple now in the fading light. "But I'm not sure where home is anymore." "Home is where your heart finds peace," Aiko said softly. "My grandmother told me this when I was small." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a promise of rain to come. Neither spoke for several minutes, comfortable in the shared silence. Finally, Luke turned to her. "What about you? Will you ever return to Japan?" Aiko set down the mortar and pestle, wiping her hands on her apron. "Perhaps someday. To see what remains, to honor ancestors." She gestured toward the clinic. "But for now, my work is here." "Your calling," Luke said, remembering Padre Esteban's words about duty versus calling. "Yes," she smiled. "Like you, I follow where grace leads." The first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering on the tin roof above them. Fireflies rose from the tall grass near the porch, their light pulsing in the gathering darkness. Aiko began to hum softly, the same hymn she had sung in the fields long ago when they first arrived. Luke recognized the melody now, a song of mercy and redemption. They sat together as night fell, listening to the rhythm of the rain, two souls finding unexpected peace far from the lands of their birth. A year passed. The seasons turned from wet to dry and back again. San Miguel flourished as peace settled over the land. The rice fields expanded, fed by irrigation channels Luke had designed based on systems he'd known in Kansas. Children who had once hidden from strangers now ran freely through the village, their laughter a constant melody. Aiko had become teacher as well as healer. Village children gathered in the clinic each morning to learn reading and writing before helping with their family's work. They called her Teacher with affection, bringing her wildflowers and clever little carvings made from wood scraps. Rosa had married Pablo, a carpenter who had lost his first wife to illness years before. Together they built a small house near the clinic, close enough that Rosa could continue her work with Aiko. One bright morning, Luke sat with Padre Esteban, watching the village come to life. Market day brought a bustle of activity as farmers and craftspeople set up stalls in the square. "I received word from Manila yesterday," Luke said. "My discharge is final. No more paperwork, no more reports." "So you are truly a free man now," the priest observed. "Seems that way." Esteban studied Luke's face. "Yet you do not look like a man celebrating freedom." Luke smiled wryly. "Freedom to do what, Father? Go back to Kansas? Stay here? I still don't know what the right choice is." "Perhaps there is no single right choice," the priest suggested. "Only different paths, each with its own purpose." Across the square, Aiko emerged from the clinic with a group of children. They carried a banner painted with bright colors, practicing for the upcoming harvest celebration. Luke watched her, admiring the patience with which she guided the smallest children. She looked up, caught his eye, and smiled briefly before turning back to her charges. Something warm settled in Luke's chest, a feeling of rightness, of belonging. Later that day, Luke joined a group of men working to cast a new bell for the church tower. The old one had cracked during a storm, its tone becoming dull and flat. Someone had suggested melting down shell casings left from the war to create the new bell. Luke liked the symbolism. Weapons transformed into an instrument of peace. The molten metal glowed orange-hot as it was poured into the mold. Sparks flew upward, dancing against the afternoon sky. Men sweated and strained, their faces lit by the fire's glow. "It will be beautiful," said Matteo, now 18 and apprenticed to the blacksmith. The angry boy who had once set fire to the seed hut had grown into a thoughtful young man. "Yes," Luke agreed, "and strong." That evening, the entire village gathered to witness the bell's unveiling. Padre Esteban blessed it with holy water, giving thanks for the peace that allowed such joyful creation. "Let this bell ring out not in warning, but in celebration," he proclaimed. "Let it call us to remember that from the ashes of war, new life has come." The bell was hoisted into the tower as the sun set, its bronze surface catching the last golden rays. When it rang for the first time, the clear tone carried across the valley, echoing from the mountainsides. Aiko stood near Luke, listening to the bell's song. Tears shimmered in her eyes, catching the light like tiny stars. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "A new beginning?" Luke replied. And in that moment, with the bell's tone surrounding them, he knew his path forward. Decades passed. The small village of San Miguel grew into a bustling town. Paved roads replaced dirt tracks. Electric lights brightened homes that once knew only candles and oil lamps. In a comfortable house near the now expanded clinic, Rosa sat by a window, her once black hair now silver. A journal lay open on her lap, and she wrote with careful strokes, recording memories before they could fade. Today marks 40 years since that morning when we were told to line up at dawn. I was young then, full of anger at those I saw only as enemies. How could I have known that those women would change everything? Aiko left us 5 years ago, peacefully in her sleep. Until the end, her hands never stopped healing. The cross she carried through the war still hangs in the clinic, a reminder of faith that survives even the darkest times. Luke followed her 2 winters later. They never married. Both carried too many ghosts from the past, I think. But they shared a purpose and a deep friendship that sustained them through the years. We buried him under the mango tree where he liked to sit in the evenings, watching the sunset. His headstone reads simply, "He chose compassion." Their legacy lives on in this valley. The House of Dawn now trains nurses who serve throughout the islands. Children and grandchildren of former enemies work side by side, the old hatreds forgotten. Sometimes, when the evening light falls just so across the rice fields, I remember that terrible morning when 12 women stood waiting for death. Instead, they found life, and brought life to us all. Rosa closed her journal, hearing the distant bell of the House of Dawn calling students to afternoon lessons. The sound carried clearly in the cool air, just as it had for decades. She walked to the window and looked out across the town she had helped build. Former enemies had become family here. Children with mixed heritage played in streets that once knew only fear and division. It was never an ending, she whispered to herself, echoing words Aiko had often said. Only the beginning of the light. The bell rang once more, its tone a reminder of metal once made for destruction, now calling people to healing and hope. Rosa smiled as she watched young nurses in white uniforms crossing the square, carrying on the work begun so long ago. The light of late afternoon turned the mountains gold, just as it had on that first day. But now it fell on a valley transformed, not by war's destruction, but by the harder, holier work of peace. Outside her window, paper cranes hung from a tree branch, spinning gently in the breeze. Dozens of them, folded by generations of children who had learned the art Iko had brought from across the sea. In the distance, beyond the town and fields, the sun began its descent behind the mountains. But in San Miguel, the light that had dawned decades ago with an act of unexpected mercy continued to shine, passing from hand to hand, heart to heart, an unbroken chain of compassion that war could not destroy and time could not dim.